Tony Stark mentors Peter Parker. When we talk about mentorship in the MCU, few relationships hit as hard as Tony Stark and Peter Parker. On the surface, it looked like a billionaire playboy adopting a kid's sidekick, but in reality, it became one of the MCU's most emotional mentor-protege bonds. Peter was introduced in Captain America: Civil War, and instantly, Tony saw a younger version of himself. Smart, ambitious, reckless, and constantly trying to prove he belonged. Stark didn't just hand him a flashy suit, he gave Peter direction. In Spider-Man: Homecoming, Tony tested Peter constantly. He pulled the training wheels protocol on the suit, shadowed his missions, and reminded Peter that being a hero wasn't about big battles. It was about responsibility. It's the same lesson Tony had to learn in his own arc, now being passed on to the next generation. But mentorship isn't always smooth. In Homecoming, when Peter tried to bite off more than he could chew against the Vulture, Tony stepped in and delivered one of the MCU's coldest mentor lines. "If you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it."
If you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it.
That was Tony teaching Peter humility the hard way. By Infinity War, their relationship had grown. Stark knighted Peter into the Avengers on the spot.
Kid, you're an Avenger now.
He trusted him with intergalactic missions, literally bringing him onto the spaceship to fight Thanos' Black Order. But that decision cut deep when Peter turned to dust in Tony's arms, the moment that scarred him for years. Fast forward to Endgame. Everything Tony did, time travel, building the gauntlet, snapping Thanos out of existence, was anchored by his promise to Peter. He saw the kid again, gave him one last hug, and then made the ultimate sacrifice. For Peter, Tony's death wasn't just the loss of a mentor, it was losing the father figure he never had. The aftermath is just as important. In Far From Home, Peter struggles to fill Tony's shoes. Nick Fury, or rather Talos, pressures him to step up. But it's Happy Hogan who grounds him by reminding him, Tony believed in you because he knew you could be better than him. That's the ultimate mentorship legacy, leaving someone not as a copy of you, but an upgraded version. Tony Stark may be gone, but Peter Parker's entire arc is proof that Stark's mentorship worked. He didn't create another Iron Man. He helped forge Spider-Man. Steve Rogers mentors Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes. If Tony was the flawed mentor who taught through tough love, Steve Rogers was the idealist mentor who led by example. His protege journey spans two men, Sam Wilson, the Falcon, who became the next Captain America, and Bucky Barnes, the broken best friend who needed belief more than training. Sam and Steve's bond started in the Winter Soldier. They met as soldiers, but quickly connected through shared values. Sam understood Steve's loneliness, being a man out of time. Steve saw in Sam the same loyalty and selflessness that had carried him through the war. It wasn't about power, it was about principles. Steve didn't need to lecture Sam, he just showed him how to lead by doing the right thing, even when the world said otherwise. By Endgame, Steve's decision to hand Sam the shield wasn't random. It was the ultimate passing of the torch. Out of all the Avengers, Steve knew Sam had the heart, humility, and strength of character to carry the mantle. That moment wasn't just symbolic. It was the conclusion of years of subtle mentorship. Then there's Bucky. Steve's relationship with Bucky is more complicated. They grew up as equals, brothers in arms, but after Hydra brainwashed Bucky, Steve became less of a friend and more of a mentor figure. He never gave up on him, even when the world saw Bucky as a terrorist. From Winter Soldier through Civil War, Steve taught Bucky that redemption is possible, not through lectures, but by standing by him when no one else would. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier pushed both mentorships to the next level. For Sam, Steve's absence became a challenge. The shield felt like a burden, not a gift. His entire arc was about deciding whether he could live up to Rogers' example, and in the end, he didn't just take the shield, he redefined it. That's what every great mentor wants. Not someone to mimic them, but someone to evolve beyond them. For Bucky, the struggle was internal. He had to unlearn years of brainwashing, find peace with his past, and learn how to be more than just a weapon. Steve gave him the foundation. Unwavering belief that he was worth saving. That faith became Bucky's compass when everything else fell apart. Together, Sam and Bucky represent Steve's mentorship in two halves. Sam inherits his mantle, while Bucky inherits his hope. And that's why Steve Rogers' influence lives on long after he stepped out of the timeline. The Ancient One, Wong and Mordo, mentored Dr. Strange. Stephen Strange didn't walk into Kamartaj a hero. He walked in arrogant, broken, and desperate. The Ancient One, Wong, and Mordo became the three pillars that reshaped him into the Sorcerer Supreme. Each of them mentored him in their own way, and each left a different mark. The Ancient One was Strange's primary mentor, a teacher who challenged his ego as much as she trained his abilities. She didn't hand him wisdom, she forced him to confront his flaws. In Doctor Strange, when Strange mocked the mystic arts as nonsense, she shattered his arrogance with a single astral push across the multiverse.
Open your eyes. Shape reality.
That was the wake-up call. Strange wasn't nearly as smart or powerful as he thought. The Ancient One drilled humility into him, teaching that power without purpose is just destruction. Then there was Mordo. At first, he was Strange's mentor in combat, training him with blades and magical weapons. He taught Strange discipline and respect for rules. But here's where it gets interesting. Mordo's downfall became Strange's greatest lesson. Mordo's obsession with rigid order contrasted with Strange's eventual flexibility. That betrayal planted the seed that mentorship isn't always about following. Sometimes it's about learning what not to become. And then, Wong. The straight man to Strange's arrogance, Wong was part mentor, part equal, and eventually the Sorcerer Supreme in his own right. In their early interactions, Wong's role was to ground Strange in the history and rules of the mystic arts. He was the one reminding him, knowledge has consequences, and spells aren't toys. Over time, Wong became Strange's anchor, the voice of reason that balanced Strange's impulsive decisions. The Ancient One gave Strange vision, Mordo gave him caution, and Wong gave him balance. That trifecta turned a broken surgeon into Earth's defender. Every spell Strange casts carries their fingerprints, and it's why, when Strange later took on protégés of his own, he didn't just pass down power, he passed down the lessons he inherited from his own mentors. Doctor Strange mentors America Chavez. By the time we hit Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Strange himself stepped into the mentor role. And his protégé? America Chavez, a teenager with the unique power to punch star-shaped portals across the multiverse. At first, Strange treated America less like a student and more like a burden. He saw her power as dangerous and uncontrolled, something to protect, but also something that could cost lives. In true Strange fashion, his arrogance led him to think he knew what was best for her, but that's where the mentorship arc really begins. Strange had to learn how to teach without controlling. The key moment comes when America doubts herself. She believes she can't control her powers, that every jump she's ever made was an accident. Strange flips the script. Instead of taking over, he reminds her, "You've been doing it all along."
Yes, you can. You have been all along.
That's mentorship at its purest, giving someone the belief that they already have what it takes. What makes this bond powerful is the parallel. Strange started as the student who needed to be humbled. Now he's the mentor who must humble himself by trusting America to handle the fight. In the climax, Strange doesn't defeat Scarlet Witch by overpowering her. He wins by empowering America to step up. It's a full-circle mentorship moment. The Ancient One forced Strange to see beyond himself. Strange, in turn, helps America see her own strength. That's the evolution of a true mentor, moving from arrogance to guidance. Hawkeye mentors Kate Bishop. Clint Barton never saw himself as mentor material. He was the guy with a bow in a world of gods and super soldiers. But in the Hawkeye series, he found himself in a reluctant mentor role to Kate Bishop, a fangirl-turned-partner who idolized him more than he ever deserved. Kate's entire arc is built on hero worship. As a child, she saw Hawkeye fight the Chitauri in the Avengers. To her, he wasn't just another Avenger. He was proof that ordinary people could stand among gods. That moment inspired her to pick up a bow, to train obsessively, and to chase the dream of being a hero. When Clint meets her, he doesn't want the job. He's worn down, scarred by years as an Avenger, and haunted by his time as Ronin. He knows what hero life really costs: family, peace, and sometimes your soul. That's why his mentorship feels different. It's not about teaching Kate to shoot straighter. It's about teaching her the weight of the life she's choosing. Throughout the series, Clint constantly tries to push Kate away, to protect her from the dangers he knows too well. But Kate doesn't just learn from him, she teaches him too. She reminds him why he fought in the first place, why being a hero still matters, even after the scars. The payoff comes when Clint finally acknowledges her not as a nuisance, but as his partner. He teaches her about trick arrows, about strategy, but more importantly, he shows her that mentorship isn't about keeping someone safe. It's about preparing them for the fight. By the finale, Kate isn't just Clint's student. She's his equal. And in that transition, Clint Barton proves that even the most reluctant mentors can inspire the next generation. Zuri mentors T'Challa. Every king needs a guide, And for T'Challa, that guide was Zuri. He wasn't a flashy warrior or a royal strategist. He was the spiritual anchor of Wakanda, a bridge between tradition and leadership, and a quiet mentor to the young king. Zuri's mentorship wasn't about combat or politics, it was about truth. He was the keeper of Wakanda's secrets, and that put him in the position to shape how T'Challa saw his father, his legacy, and his nation. Early on, Zuri advised T'Challa on humility and patience, reminding him that being king wasn't just about ruling, but about serving. But the real weight of Zuri's mentorship comes with the revelation of Eric Killmonger's past. Zuri held the secret of T'Chaka's crime, the killing of Killmonger's father. When that truth came out, it shattered T'Challa's perception of his father and forced him to confront what kind of king he wanted to be. Here's where mentorship gets complicated. Zuri guided T'Challa with wisdom, but he also withheld truths. And that secrecy became both a lesson and a burden. T'Challa had to learn not just from Zuri's words, but from his mistakes. In the end, Zuri dies protecting T'Challa, fulfilling his role as both guardian and guide. But his impact lingers. T'Challa's decision to open Wakanda to the world, to break cycles of secrecy, is directly tied to Zuri's mentorship, both the wisdom he gave and the secrets he kept. Zuri's legacy is a reminder. Mentors aren't perfect. Sometimes the lessons come not from what they teach, but from what they hide. And for T'Challa, those lessons defined his reign as Black Panther. T'Challa mentors Shuri. T'Challa may have been king, but he was also a brother. And while their sibling relationship in Black Panther was often played for laughs, Shuri cracking jokes about her brother's sandals,
What are those?
beneath the humor was a subtle mentorship that shaped Shuri into Wakanda's next leader. Shuri was the scientific genius of Wakanda, constantly innovating new technology, from vibranium suits to medical advancements. T'Challa didn't just tolerate her creativity, he encouraged it. That encouragement was its own form of mentorship. By trusting Shuri with Wakanda's most sacred resources, T'Challa showed her that leadership wasn't about holding all the power yourself, but empowering others. In Black Panther, when T'Challa fell in combat to Killmonger, Shuri was thrust into a leadership role far earlier than expected. It was her brother's influence, his compassion, his patience, and his respect for her intellect that prepared her to rise to that moment. The bond deepened in Infinity War and Endgame. Even while the Avengers battled cosmic threats, Shuri's innovations became vital to the fight. And after T'Challa's death in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Shuri stepped fully into the role of Black Panther herself. The emotional weight of that transformation wasn't just about losing a brother, it was about honoring the mentor who believed in her before anyone else did. Mentorship doesn't always look like lessons and speeches. Sometimes it's just respect. T'Challa respected Shuri enough to treat her as an equal long before the world saw her as one. That's the kind of quiet mentorship that changes lives and nations. Yondu mentors Star-Lord. Few mentorship arcs in the MCU are as unconventional or as heartbreaking as Yondu and Peter Quill. On paper, Yondu was a Ravager who kidnapped a child. In reality, he became the father figure Peter never had, shaping him into Star-Lord through a mix of tough love and, let's be honest, questionable parenting. Yondu raised Quill after taking him from Earth, originally as a job for Ego, Peter's celestial father. But instead of handing him over, Yondu kept him, sensing Ego's true intentions. On the surface, Yondu appeared harsh, constantly berating Peter and threatening him. But underneath that gruff exterior was protection. Yondu knew what Ego would have done, and so, in his own way, he saved Peter's life. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, that mentorship came full circle. Quill initially resented Yondu, seeing him only as the man who stole his childhood. But the truth emerged in Yondu's sacrifice. He may not have been Peter's biological father, but as Yondu put it, he may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
That line cemented Yondu's role as more than just a Ravager captain. He was a mentor who, despite his flaws, taught Peter loyalty, survival, and ultimately the meaning of family. Yondu's death hit harder than most because it revealed the depth of that mentorship. For Peter, the lesson was clear. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you when it matters. Odin mentors Thor and Loki. Odin's mentorship is one of the most complicated in the MCU because his guidance shaped two very different sons, Thor and Loki, with drastically different outcomes. For Thor, Odin was the archetypal mentor, the wise but stern father who taught him about leadership, humility, and responsibility. In Thor, Odin strips Thor of his hammer and power, casting him to Earth to learn humility.
I now take from you your power.
Odin knew Thor's arrogance would make him a poor king, so he let him fail, and then earn his worth. For Loki, though, Odin's mentorship was more destructive. Odin raised him as his son, but concealed his true frost giant heritage. That secret festered, fueling Loki's sense of betrayal and unworthiness. Instead of guidance, Loki felt deception. Odin may have meant to protect him, but the lack of honesty poisoned their bond. In Thor Ragnarok, Odin's final lessons were delivered not in lectures, but in visions. He reminded Thor that his power didn't come from Mjolnir, but from within. He reminded Loki that he was more than the god of mischief, that he could choose a different path. For Thor, Odin's mentorship forged a king. For Loki, it created conflict, but also planted the seed for redemption. Odin's mentorship was flawed, imperfect, and often harsh, but it left an indelible mark on both sons. Thor inherited his strength and compassion. Loki inherited his cunning and, eventually, his capacity for growth. Odin's legacy is proof that mentors don't just shape destinies, they also create struggles their students must overcome. Dreykov mentors Natasha Romanoff. Not all mentors are noble, and Dreykov is a prime example of mentorship twisted into manipulation. As the head of the Red Room, Dreykov didn't guide Natasha Romanoff. He controlled her. Natasha's childhood was stolen, her agency stripped away. Dreykov's mentorship was about conditioning, teaching obedience, manipulation, and assassination. In Black Widow, we see the extent of his cruelty. He didn't build protégés, he built weapons. Natasha's skills as a spy and assassin came from that environment, but so did her trauma. And yet, even twisted mentorship leaves its mark. Dreykov taught Natasha how to adapt, how to outthink her enemies, how to survive in impossible conditions. The difference is that Natasha eventually turned those lessons against him. Her real victory wasn't just defeating Dreykov physically, it was breaking free of his influence, reclaiming her agency, and mentoring the next generation, on her own terms. Dreykov represents the dark side of mentorship, when guidance is replaced with control and students are treated as tools instead of people. Natasha's arc proves that even in the worst mentorships, students can rise above their teachers. Natasha Romanoff mentors Yelena Belova. If Dreykov represents toxic mentorship, Natasha represents the healing of it. Her relationship with Yelena Belova in Black Widow is both sisterly and mentor-like, bridging trauma with hope. Unlike Dreykov, Natasha didn't control Yelena. She empowered her. Their bond was strained. Years of brainwashing and separation made Yelena resentful. But Natasha's mentorship wasn't about telling Yelena what to do. It was about showing her that she had choices. In the film, Natasha and Yelena reunite and take down the Red Room together. Natasha passes on her defiance, her independence, and her compassion. Yelena inherits not just fighting skills, but the belief that she can be more than what Dreykov made her. Bruce Banner mentors Jennifer Walters and Scar. Bruce Banner never asked to be a mentor, but life, and gamma radiation, had other plans. In She-Hulk Attorney at Law, we see him take on the role of teacher for his cousin, Jennifer Walters, after she's accidentally exposed to his blood and becomes She-Hulk. Bruce approaches this mentorship with the mindset of a scientist and survivor. He knows firsthand the destruction the Hulk can bring, and his first instinct is to make sure Jen avoids the same mistakes he made. That's why he builds a remote lab in Mexico, complete with meditation techniques, balance training, and emotional regulation exercises.
So all of this just feels like projecting a lot of shit onto me.
For Bruce, being Hulk was always a curse that needed to be controlled. But here's the twist. Jen adapts far faster than he expects. Where Bruce struggled for years with dual personalities and uncontrollable rage, Jen maintains her intelligence and self-control almost immediately. That frustrates Bruce. His mentorship, in a sense, is undermined by Jen's natural adaptation. Yet, that also forces Bruce to shift his approach. Instead of shaping Jen into a copy of himself, he has to recognize her individuality and accept that her journey is different. Their mentorship highlights a key truth. Teachers don't always know more than their students. Sometimes the role of a mentor is to provide context, not answers. Bruce gives Jen the tools, but Jen shows Bruce that there's more than one way to be a Hulk. Then there's Scar. Introduced briefly at the end of She-Hulk, Scar is Bruce's son, born on Sakaar during his time as the Gladiator Hulk. Bruce is about to become a father mentor. Unlike Jen, who shared his bloodline and intellect, Scar represents something new. A Hulk raised in a completely different environment, one that Bruce must now guide into Earth's world. Together, Jen and Scar reflect Bruce's dual legacy as a mentor. Jen represents the cousin he guided into her powers, while Scar represents the son he must now raise into a future hero, or perhaps even a future Avenger. Wong and Xu Wenwu mentors Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi's journey in the MCU is defined by two mentors, one toxic, one redemptive. His father, Xu Wenwu, trained him as a child to be a living weapon. Later, Wong would step in as the bridge to a larger world. Xu Wenwu's mentorship was brutal. As leader of the Ten Rings, he raised Shang-Chi in violence, drilling him in martial arts and assassinations. Wenwu didn't nurture Shang-Chi's humanity, he suppressed it. The training forged Shang-Chi's skills but scarred his childhood, creating a protégé who wanted nothing more than to escape his father's shadow. But Wenwu wasn't just a villain, he was also a grieving widower who believed he was protecting his family. That complexity makes his mentorship tragic. Wenwu's lessons gave Shang-Chi strength, but also trauma. In rejecting Wenwu's legacy, Shang-Chi still carried the skills Wenwu gave him. The son became the hero, but the father's influence never disappeared. Enter Wong. After Shang-Chi proves himself in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Wong becomes his guide into the broader MCU. Where Wenwu taught him to be a weapon, Wong teaches him to be part of something larger, a protector, not just a fighter. In the post-credit scene, Wong studies the Ten Rings, connecting Shang-Chi to the Avengers and the mystic side of the Marvel Universe. This dual mentorship, Wenwu's harsh training and Wong's open guidance, defines Shang-Chi. One shaped his body, the other shapes his future. And it's the contrast between the two that makes Shang-Chi one of the MCU's most layered heroes. Hank Pym mentors Scott Lang, Hope Van Dyne, and Cassie Lang. Hank Pym is one of Marvel's most iconic mentor figures, the original Ant-Man who reluctantly passed the mantle to others. In the MCU, his mentorship stretches across 3 generations: Scott Lang, Hope Van Dyne, and Cassie Lang. With Scott Lang, Hank saw potential in an ex-con with a good heart. He didn't choose Scott because he was the strongest or smartest. He chose him because Scott would do the right thing, even when it was hard. In Ant-Man, Hank trained Scott not only in shrinking and fighting, but in valuing second chances. It's mentorship rooted in redemption. With Hope Van Dyne, the mentorship is more personal. As his daughter, she grew up under Hank's shadow and resented him for keeping her away from the Ant-Man suit. But over time, Hank recognized her brilliance and capability, eventually trusting her as the Wasp. Their mentorship is less about skills and more about reconciliation, a father learning to trust his daughter as his equal. And with Cassie Lang, Hank becomes almost a grandfatherly mentor. In Quantumania, Cassie's curiosity and courage mirror both Scott and Hope, and Hank encourages her to embrace her scientific talents. By helping Cassie navigate the quantum realm, Hank lays the groundwork for yet another protégé to rise. Hank's mentorship is unique because it evolves. He's not just a teacher, he's a bridge. He takes his own failures, his lost years, and uses them to build up the next generation of heroes. Eric Selvig mentors Jane Foster and Darcy Lewis. Not all mentors are warriors or sorcerers. Some are scientists. Eric Selvig may not have superpowers, but his influence shaped 2 key figures, Jane Foster and Darcy Lewis. As an astrophysicist, Selvig was Jane's colleague and guide in her research into wormholes and cosmic phenomena. He encouraged her curiosity, grounded her wild theories in science, and gave her the stability to pursue discoveries that would eventually connect her to Thor and Asgard.
Where were you?
Where were you? Heimdall cannot see you.
Hi.
Without Selvig, Jane's breakthroughs wouldn't have happened. With Darcy, Selvig played the role of patient mentor to a sometimes overwhelmed intern. Darcy's journey from comic relief in Thor to a confident scientist in WandaVision reflects Selvig's guidance. He gave her opportunities to grow, trusted her instincts, and treated her as more than just comic relief. Selvig's mentorship may be understated compared to others in the MCU, but it's vital. He represents the idea that not all mentors are superheroes. Some just push you to ask bigger questions, and in doing so, they change the course of the universe. Wolverine mentors X-23. With the introduction of Deadpool and Wolverine, it's fair to say Logan is now part of the MCU, and it's impossible to ignore the raw power of the mentorship between Wolverine and Laura, also known as X-23. Their relationship takes the mentor-protégé dynamic and strips it down to its most brutal and emotional core. When Logan first meets Laura, he doesn't want the responsibility. He's broken, weary, and dying. The last thing he wants is to take care of a child, let alone one who mirrors his own violent past. Laura, born through genetic experimentation with Logan's DNA, is essentially his daughter, whether he accepts it or not. But like many great mentors, Logan's influence doesn't come from lectures. It comes from survival. Throughout Logan, he teaches Laura the unspoken lessons of living as a mutant in a hostile world. How to fight, how to endure, and how to protect those you care about. But what makes Logan's mentorship unique is that Laura teaches him just as much. She forces him to confront his own humanity, to recognize that even after a lifetime of violence, he still has something worth protecting. The climax of the film drives the mentorship home. Logan sacrifices himself to ensure Laura and the other mutant children can escape to freedom. His final words, telling Laura not to be what they made her, are the essence of mentorship. He gives her the choice he never had, to live as more than a weapon. Laura's future, as hinted at the film's ending, carries Logan's legacy forward. She isn't just his protégé, she's his redemption. Dr. Wendy Lawson mentors Carol Danvers. In Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers' entire origin is tied to her mentor, Dr. Wendy Lawson, secretly the Kree scientist Mar-Vell. Lawson wasn't just Carol's boss at the Air Force, she was the guiding figure who pushed Carol to think bigger, to embrace courage in the face of limits. Lawson's mentorship was subtle, but profound. She encouraged Carol to challenge authority, to trust her instincts, and to never accept that she was just a girl who couldn't keep up. That encouragement became the foundation of Carol's resilience, even before she had powers. When Carol gains her abilities after the experimental engine explosion, Lawson's influence lives on through memory and revelation. The discovery that Lawson was a Kree defector who fought for peace against the Empire reframed Carol's mission. She wasn't just fighting villains, she was continuing her mentor's legacy. Lawson's mentorship shows how a mentor's influence can last long after they're gone. For Carol, Lawson wasn't just the reason she got her powers, she was the reason Carol knew how to use them responsibly. Captain Marvel mentors Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau. By the time we reach Ms. Marvel and the Marvels, Carol Danvers herself steps into the mentor role. Her protégés, Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau, two young women inspired by and challenged by her legacy. For Kamala Khan, Carol wasn't a hands-on mentor at first. She was an idol, a larger-than-life hero Kamala worshipped from afar. But when they finally meet, the mentorship becomes real. Carol guides Kamala in controlling her powers, but more importantly, she validates her as a hero in her own right. The mentorship here isn't about training moves, it's about showing a fan that she can be more than a fangirl. For Monica Rambeau, the dynamic is more complicated. Monica grew up idolizing Carol too, but Carol's long absence created resentment. When they reconnect in the Marvels, Carol has to earn back her role as a mentor. Through teamwork and honesty, Carol helps Monica embrace her powers, even as Monica challenges Carol to reconnect with her humanity. Together, Kamala and Monica represent the dual sides of mentorship. Kamala embodies inspiration, the joy of seeing a hero you love believe in you. Monica embodies reconciliation, the harder mentorship of admitting flaws and rebuilding trust. Carol Danvers, once the protégé of Wendy Lawson, now carries that torch forward, shaping the next generation of heroes who will define the MCU's future. If you want to see a part 2 or have your own video suggestions, drop it in the comments.